Hey, it's Andrew, TechRaptor here. I'm here with Jim, Creative Assembly, talking Total War Warhammer 2. I had the chance to check it out earlier. One of the things that I was looking into is that you guys are having a greater focus on the narrative this time around. Is that true? So what entails that? What are you guys doing?
Well, the game this time round for Total War Warhammer 2 revolves around the Great Vortex, which is something that's drawn from the Warhammer lore. It's very central. So there was this big battle against the forces of Chaos millennia ago. They were attacking the High Elves and the Lizardmen. The High Elves formulated a plan to conduct a ritual which would siphon the stuff of Chaos from the world. That fatally weakened that Chaos assault, and they managed then to drive it back. Now, our four races in Total War Warhammer 2 are trying to influence that vortex in various ways, and each of those races has their own unique motivation for wanting to do that, their own unique narrative arc, with movies kind of supporting that and taking the player through. And this is actually the method by which you can win the game. You conduct a series of rituals, you find resources required for those rituals throughout the game. It's a sandbox environment, so we've provided a wide variety of means of getting those resources. As you cast those rituals, various kind of events kick off. When you get to the fifth ritual, then a climactic battle is kind of launched where you're basically fighting for the fate of the world. And it's important to note that you're racing against the AI factions here, and they can actually win that race as well. So, as well as the traditional kind of short-term and medium-term goals that everybody's familiar with from a Total War campaign, where you kind of prioritize those, chuck some of them away, you keep all those plates spinning. Now we've got that kind of long-term goal which drives you right the way through the campaign.
So the narrative will be very objective based isn't really the right word, but like it's what you're doing in the game is directly tied to it.
That's right, and what we really wanted to avoid was this becoming a linear thing where players can only go about it one way. So like I say, we provided plenty of mechanics. You can search ruined settlements for the resources you need. You can go to sea and find wrecked ships with that kind of thing. You can get it through missions or quests, all those kind of things. So it's about providing that sandbox environment, not keeping that sacrosanct, because that's very much what Total War is all about, but also providing this driving narrative that draws the player through the game.
All right, switching gears a little bit, one of the big things you guys have talked about a lot since the original Total War Warhammer is this idea of the grand campaign across the original, whenever the trilogy comes out, the third game. Are we going to see how that affects the previous game, like our old races getting new stuff, or how's that going to integrate there?
Yeah, well, we adopted a strategy to do this huge breadth of content as a trilogy, just because of the sheer scale of it. We couldn't do justice to it in one game. So what that allows us to do with the DLC between the three main releases that we do is to constantly look at stuff we've done before and tweak and balance that. So you mentioned the great grand campaign. So players who bought Total War Warhammer 1 and then buy the second game, shortly after we release the second game, for free as a free LC, we are releasing this combined giant campaign map where the landmass from the first game, the landmass from the second game are together on one map. All of the races, all of the content, all of the DLC stuff is present on that map and playable. So, and it's just great that we can do that kind of stuff for free. And that's a part of the strategy we adopted to do a trilogy of games.
One of the concerns I've seen around is people are concerned that the older races might not be up to snuff in a way with the new ones. Is that a legitimate concern that they should be worried about, or?
No, not at all. I mean, we're very fortunate that the first game went so well. We've got the balancing of that game as our yardstick as we balance this new game. So we're feature complete now. We're playing the game. So we always factor in a large amount of time for balancing, because we have created an asymmetric balancing scenario, and we've done that very consciously with our eyes open. So we always scheduled in a lot of balancing time. So, and like I say, because we are dropping in content at regular intervals, it allows us to kind of go back and tweak things that perhaps we didn't get perfect the first time around. So it's just a perfect kind of strategy we're finding.
So was that like the biggest carryover from one in terms of what you guys learned in design, is like the balancing, and that's been the most, not maybe effective, but the biggest takeaway you guys have had coming into this one?
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway is we took a little bit of a risk with the first game by adopting a strategy where each of the races would have totally different campaign mechanics from each other, as well as the kind of roster mechanics which influence the battles so heavily. And that seemed to go down very well with everybody, and we as players ourselves really enjoyed that as well. So we've really doubled down on that in the second game. Each of the races has got very, very different mechanics, and as a kicker to that as well, in the first game, the two legendary lords for each of the races shared a faction. Now in the second game we've actually split them, so you've got Krokgar and Lord Mazdamundi, for example, with the Lizardmen. They're two very different characters. One's a spellcaster, one's a melee focus guy. They have their own individual factions from each other. They start in totally different parts of the world. They have different faction traits that will influence, and obviously the challenges around your different start positions for each of those characters will also influence and very heavily influence how that game pans out. So yeah, it's about keeping that variety going so that you complete one campaign and you start as a totally new race and it's a totally different experience.
About how long does a campaign take usually for each race?
It's quite flexible with this Vortex mechanic because you are racing against the AI, and you can really drill down yourself to race towards that, or you can take your time. You can knock AI factions out of that race, so you're not restricted. Again, it's a sandbox environment. You're not restricted to having to do this Vortex race. You can be much more aggressive about knocking other races out and just go for the world domination thing as well. So again, it's about keeping that sacrosanct core of what Total War is, but layering on top of it all that great flavour and content that Games Workshop have created with their tabletop game.
One of the things I wanted to ask, I know all across the Total War series, mods have been kind of a big thing, big part of the community. And I know you guys always love to support them and do stuff. Has there been, in this title, any mod that's kind of been influenced? You're like, oh man, that was a pretty, not like you're going to steal their idea necessarily, but like that was a pretty good idea, and we'll think about doing something like that or anything along those lines? Yeah,
we're constantly looking at stuff on forums and also Steam Workshop and everything. We released all the tools so that people could mod things, and we're constantly looking at some of the great ideas. We play them ourselves, so that's just a great resource for us to tap into as well. So we will continue to do that, and that's informed a lot of what we're doing on this game.
And so just to end, is there any one thing that you want people to know about? Because it comes out in October?
September 28th.
September 28th. Anything that you want them to know before going into that?
It's a standalone game from the first game, but they kind of hang together in the way that I told you with the great grand campaign. If you love the first game, you'll love this one. It's not something where we've completed the first game and thought, well, we'll just reskin that for this second game and keep knocking them out there. We've continued to kind of raise that bar with the differentiation between the races. We've got this totally new campaign mechanic with the great Vortex and everything. We've got a multiplayer free-for-all mode where four players can just kick off against each other with no alliances present. It's last man standing. So it's just about constantly innovating and trying to raise that bar as we go along.
For sure. Is there anything else you want to tell people about or add?
Well, if you like dinosaurs, then Lizardmen are your faction. We've got 3 other great factions, races within the game as well. So if you love the first game, then you'll absolutely love this one as well.
All right. Well, this is Andrew again with TechRaptor. That's Jim from Creative Assembly, and that was Total War Warhammer 2.